Hello, everybody. I am producer flying today, back with the Neon Power Rankings, joined with Mad Mac
Yo, what's good, y'all?
and June.
Hello.
And with that being said, Mac, take it away, please.
Okay, so no surprise, we're starting 14 to 1. At the bottom for this PR is Ottawa. Team hasn't done any changes so far. So still working with the same team from the beginning of the season, still has those same issues. Going directly into the games, we're starting to see now that the team's issues are consistent. So the win cons are always your Iron Bundle and your Chi-Yu, but based on play, they're just not getting the right support for coming in and doing that damage. I'd also say that it's been rough, obviously. You're 0-4. But like there's not much to say here other than that. There's just a lack of support pieces for your big hitters. But that's been the issue. I do think trades, if you make some trades, you could still scrape by if you play really well. But at this point, it's starting to look of how do we make our ground back the best? Because we're starting to get close, right? Still think you can make it. I also think there's just an issue of play with this team. Of the way you're playing certain exchanges in a match. Like, for example, clicking Overheat into both Toadscruel and Scizor, the free sacks, which then costs you your week 3 game because now your special attack is lowered, so you can't get that extra damage off you need. Clicking something like Fire Blast there, or just Flamethrower, just because having that knowledge of, all right, they're not going to let this big piece go, they're definitely going to sack the Pokemon in the back. And that just comes with the more play you do and the more comfortable you get with the team. But coming into week 4 now, and you're still not comfortable making those plays with the team, I think it's time to re-coordinate your efforts elsewhere and maybe get up another couple pieces to support those mons. I think a great screener would be great for these mons. I think a great setup threat would be great for these mons. Something to come in the early to mid game, set up, be scary, get lots of damage and chip off, maybe pick up 1 or 2 kills, trade for a couple pieces, would really help your Chi-Yu and Iron Bundle come in and clean up one by one.
I was looking at it, and I want to extend on the point of a setup sweeper. I feel like we've said this every single time Ottawa has come up in these power rankings. I really don't think Chi-Yu needs a Terra, and I think a mon that really loves the Terra is Sinistra. I was thinking about it, and I think Sinistra could give you an alternative win con to both Chi-Yu and Bundle, or the idea of Max said of just coming in the mid game, setting up some calm mines and taking out a few mons, or hampering them in any way. But yeah, I think what Max said was really correct. I think, as always, maybe a little bit more physical pieces would be nice, but yeah, I still think I think this team could be doing a lot better as it currently is.
I agree. Moving on to 13th, we have the Carolina Cetitans. Picked up your first win against Timekeepers, which, based on strength of schedule, that's a pretty big win. Game was super close. You love to see it. The bulk really carried you through a lot of this game of that, and then your hazards. Your hazards really did a lot for you here. And Garchomp just shows why it's such a good Pokemon, because it can do so many different things for a team. But yeah, super close game. Really great game. And then you go into week 4 and you get 6-0'd by just an Iron Crown set, which at that point, that's a little bit of a building issue, less of a play issue. You have to have something for Iron Crown, because Iron Crown does a couple things at most. So live and learn, move on to the next week, and now you know for next drafts you do, or if you ever run into the Iron Crown again, now you know that it needs a little bit more care in your building. Team, there has been some team trades, which I want to bring up. These were made during week 4 going into week 5, but they're big enough that I want to point them out. You got rid of your captain, Terra Captain Iron Jugulus, which I think was really strong, and you picked up T-Tar. And then you got rid of Urshifu Rapid Strike, and you picked up Scaly Dirge, and then you picked up a Magnezone, and then you moved Terra from Necrozma to Scaly Dirge. Terra, Dirge, fine. I think Necrozma is a little bit better, but I think it also differs from playstyle. So if you're more comfortable with Dirge, good. But T-Tar, I think, is really bad for you. Not only Terra T-Tar is not super great. I mean, a D-Dance set with Terra could work. But when you Terra with your Sandstream up, now you're losing that Spadef and you're buffeting yourself. Also, now you have the Sand up and you're going to break your own Terra Shell on Terrapagos whenever T-Tar and Terrapagos are in the same game. And you want to bring Terrapagos to every game because it's your removal and it's like a really strong setup sweeper and a threat that you have to bring every week. And you're like, oh, I can bring Glasses, but now you're not going to be Boots, so Hazards are going to break your Terra Shell. Meaning if T-Tar comes to a game, it needs to show up, it can't be Sandstream. Which is like the whole thing with T-Tar. Otherwise, other trades are fine, but I just think T-Tar is a negative overall on your draft. But I could be wrong. We'll see how it plays, but it's doing a lot of anti-synergy for what you want it to do. From there, I mean, we'll have to see. Again, Dirge isn't the worst. I think dropping Urshifu Rapid Strike in general is a little rough. I think it was a really good physical threat you needed alongside Garchomp, because now your physical threats are a little lacking, but again, that might just come down to a comfort pick if you're more comfortable playing with Terra Dirge. So, we'll see.
Yeah, I think the main point of the Tyranitar has been hit on. There's another point of, I get Tyranitar is a strong mon on its own, but I think to make its full potential is you do have to have something to abuse that sand that it's setting up. And like, you do have mons that interact with the sand, but I mean, let's be real, you're not running Sand Force Gastrodon. I don't think Sandvale Garchomp is allowed. So yeah, overall, I really, really don't get what T-Tar is doing here. And I think losing out on Terra Necrozma also loses out on a huge win con that you could build around. So now I feel like everyone can go into your matches and say, hey, okay, the win con is Terrapagos. I cannot let Terrapagos get set up, spin, Calm Mind, whatever. And that's kind of it. You do have scary threats, Chomp is there, but like Max said, it's really the only thing I'm scared of physically on this team. Like Tyranitar can do stuff, but you need those turns to set up. So I think overall, as the point Max has been saying, I think these trades have really hampered this team and just kneecaps you.
Moving on to now number 12 is the Richmond Ragingbolts. No teams, so again, this team is just raw as the day it was born. Terra Rotom Wash, Terra Registeel. I don't think we've seen Terra Rotom Wash show up once. I think it's all been Terra Registeel. And going on to the weeks played, you got a 2-0 loss to Melbourne Metronomers, and then you picked up a 1-0 win against East Coast Krooks. And I believe you brought the same team both weeks. I believe. At least ridiculously similar teams. Which is funny. I feel like the week one, it's like, this team could have done better. You just bring it again, and it's like, you know what? There you go. Did what it needed to. A couple play things during those weeks. For example, against that Bax, when you had Registeel out, you had the Terra Normal. I feel like if you clicked that for the just EQ coming out, because the EQ had to come out there because it wasn't going to kill you with an Ice move, that could have given you extra turns to get damage off on that Bax, which could have helped. Because 2-0 was close. A couple different plays, and you could have inched out a win there, for sure. Tailwind Urshifu is super scary. I mean, I guess, like, Hydrapple was eating it, technically, but, like, it was still doing huge chunks, especially because that burn you got on it earlier. But yeah, it's just making those little plays of, like I said with Ottawa, of the knowledge of how your team functions and the ability to say, all right, they're going to do this, so I need to react like this, is really, now that we're getting to the end game, is what's going to inch you out those wins. Because just like, and I guess this goes for all teams, the more you understand your team and you play with it, the more your opponents have seen you play with your team, and they're going to understand it from a different perspective, from a more, I'm going to fight this team perspective. So you have to have that knowledge going into a match, or else they're just going to be able to inch out those wins on you, even if your team technically has the matchup advantage. Going into week 2, again, it's the same team, but Moltres is super scary. It's like, I think it's a really good Pokemon. I think if you had Terra on that, I believe it's Terra legal. If you had Terra on that, over your Registeel Rotom Wash, but like I know I'm not going to convince you to move that Terra, but like imagine in those games if you had that Terra. It would be so scary. Otherwise, your team kind of did the same thing it did every week, but this week you're able to get a couple extra kills. Again, Terra Wicked Blow is crazy scary. Moving on, I think you have a chance to make playoffs, but your team needs to find an extra spark. It needs to be able to kind of do different things each week, because if you bring the same team every week, people are going to realize that by like the next week and be like, oh, all right, well then I know the sets I need to bring because I know what you're going to bring. But yeah.
Yeah, I do think this team does really struggle with what Max was saying of just, I feel like you kind of know what every single one of these mons are going to do whenever they get, like, especially because Richmond has been using the same sets over and over again. I think that's going to be the biggest downfall of this team, is because draft, you need that like surprise factor on your opponent, and having an opponent that goes, hey, I know exactly what, or like mostly knows this is what this is going to do, maybe with a few adjustments for like, you know, coverage and stuff, it's really bad. So I think he really does need to switch up some of these sets and some of these mons.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's going to happen. But yeah, I mean, I would be shocked if he didn't make it to playoffs, but I'm always down for an underdog story.
Moving on to number 11 is Caborca. Before we begin, week 3 had a lot of trades done. So I want to bring those up because I'm overall a fan of lots of the trades. So week 3 trades: Garganackle to King Gambit, Thundurus to Zapdos, Bramblegast got dropped.
No, other way around.
Other way around. Oh yeah, other way around because on the sheet. You picked up Garganackle, picked up Thundurus. Bramblegast got dropped. You picked up Allowtails. You picked up Cresselia. You picked up Komodo. You have some really strong threats now, which I like. Komodo is super scary. It's a scary mom. We just saw, I forget which replay it was. Was it this one where the Clangorous Soul came out to play?
I don't believe so.
But there was just a live comm I just watched. Anyway, Clangorous Soul is legal, which means if you have Terra on it, which it looks like you do, it's going to be a super scary threat. Especially now that you have Allowtails to set up Veil for it, and you have Cresselia, you can Healing Wish with it. I think there's some really strong synergy pieces here, and I think the team got a lot better. I also think that getting rid of the Terra on Hawlucha and Arcanine was really smart, just because you weren't bringing Terra Arcanine a lot, and Terra Hawlucha, Unburdened Sweeps, it's not a go-to like Sneasler is. It needs the right matchup. So overall, big fan of the trades. Moving on to week 3. Week 3, you went up against a really strong, what is there? Uncertain Unknowns. Jeez. And you got 5-0'd. And it's rough. It's a rough place to be at for sure. But the game itself wasn't horrible. I feel like in this game, the weakness of Terra Hawlucha really showed itself. It's not able to come in and against a lot of teams really pick up those sweeps without needing a lot of support. And I think you did pick up those support pieces with like Aloe and Cress and some bulkier mons. But in this week, you didn't have those pieces to support it, and so it wasn't the big explosion in the match that you were hoping it to be. I think a couple sets were also a little strange. I think Curse, Wheezing Galar is interesting. I'm curious to know exactly what it was for, because I feel like it was a point of it being there. But it not just being able to be a physical wall for like Roaring Moon or Iron Hands straight up, and it was more of a setup threat, really kind of hurt. Especially with Roaring Moon. Moving on to week 6, you picked up a 6-0 with Iron Crown. Iron Crown was just able to do his Iron Crown things, which just goes to show the power of that Pokemon. And you were able to set up Veil here, which shows you the strength of just having come in, set up a Veil, you're strong against everything. Now your setup threats are coming in and they're doing what they need to do and just picking up those wins. Just to show the strength of some of those pickups. So I'm excited, looking forward now with that 6-0 under your belt for Diff. you definitely have a shot at playoffs. If you can keep up the momentum and keep your setup threats like scary with your Alolan Ninetales and Cresselia and support pieces, Tailwind if you have it for Thundurus, like you have so many options here now. I think if you really push, you can make it to playoffs. And I really hope to see you doing that push.
Yeah, I think this team just got a lot more condensed in what it was trying to do. Instead of this being this team that felt like it was trying to do too many things at one time, now I feel like you have clear goals of what this team is, and I think that really helps. I think, obviously, the Ninetales with the screens, obviously, has been said. I think, obviously, Levitate's very good, but I actually think there's good value in Misty Terrain to stop any status from going on to, like, any, like, physical Como sets or Halucha. Even getting Thunder Waved would be terrible for it. So I think this team has gotten a lot better, and I'm expecting a huge upswing for Caborca going into these next couple of weeks.
I fully agree. Next, we have in 10th, Uncertain Unknowns. Same trades, no trades are made in week 3, week 4. Still a super strong team after the week 2 trades of picking up like Removal, Bronzong, Mimikyu, Frostlass. Iron Moth, Terra is a threat, obviously. Week 3 picked up a strong 5-0 we just covered with Caborca. Here, it just went to show that your bulk here, your bulk that's not just straight bulk, right? Like it's bulk, but it's a threat at the same time. Like Terra Heatran is so hard to break, and it does really good consistent damage. Iron Hands is a mon that from experience, it's so fat, but man, it just chunks out damage when it needs to. And then having something like Frostlass was a really good support piece for you this week. It came in and it died, but like it did exactly what it needed to. It stopped certain threats from being there. It came in as your immunity for Halucha. And Cruel. We didn't see Cruel much in the match because not a lot of hazards went up. But just having it and like having that, man, for my Terra Flying Heatran or my Iron Moth or my Frostlass, I have consistent removal in the back is so good. Then moving into week 4, a really close game against Melbourne. Here we go. So this week, the team was a little interesting. The Mimikyu, Bronzong, Whimsicott all showing up was interesting. I feel like Ceruledge was just kind of unchecked a little bit by what you brought. I think that was more so of a building issue. Of it just was scary for you to come up against certain one of these mons. Like the Ceruledge was really scary. The Grin was really scary on switch in, which Tentacruel now, if it's going to be your water and your fire check based on the team you brought, now it's having to go up against both of those really scary Pokemon. So I think there's just a little bit of building of bring your bulkier pieces, bring your kind of offense pieces like Roaring Moon, because you're going to want to out-pressure people to kind of give you a little bit of wiggle room for your bulk. But otherwise, super close game. Looking ahead to playoffs with a 5-0 under your belt and all of your losses have been really close, I think diff-wise you can make it. The team, I think, still as it stands, isn't crazy, so your plays are going to have to be crazy. You know what I mean? You're going to have to play really well. You're going to have to know your team inside and out to pick up some of these wins going forward and then inch out maybe into playoffs.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I agree with what Max said. Again, I think this is a good team. I definitely see this team as number 8, especially looking at the schedule going forward. I mean, 3 out of the 4 remaining matches left are teams lower than Rex. So I think Rex definitely have a good shot at making playoffs here. And yeah, I do think Rex knows this team pretty well, in and out. And I think he has been playing well. It's just maybe not prepping the best is the thing. But I still think it's a good team. I still think it's a solid. I think it could be number 8, and we could see this in playoffs.
For sure. Moving on to number 9, coming out of the double digits, is Melbourne Metronomers. And this team is finally picking up some wins. 2 wins back-to-back on week 3 and 4, which you love to see because this team looks so fun. No trades that we haven't covered already. So moving on straight to your games, week 1 was against Oh my gosh. Registeel.
Richmond.
Richmond. Jeez. Was against Richmond. Again, their team, they have some scary threats, but you just pivoted so well around each of them. Each of them got handled exactly how you needed them to. John Yakuza was it was funny, but also Bring the Resto Chesto really helped shut down that Moltres early, which I think did a lot for you. Because now you have wiggle room. The tricking onto the Registeel, the choice specs, perfect turn. The Bax plays were exactly what you needed them to be and inched you out the win there, which is awesome. Bax is so strong. It's such a threat. And then Terra Gren is Terra Gren. I mean, it's always going to show up. It's always going to play hard. It's always going to do chunks of damage when you need it to. Even though, for this team, I mean, Terra Ground into the Volcanion, perfect. It had no pressure on it whatsoever in that in-game, and that's exactly what Gren wants to see. Moving on to week 4 was against the Uncertain Unknowns. And this type, just on matchup, you just preview, had super strong Mons going into them. Like I said before, the Grin and the Ceruledge both looked really strong here. And you played really well. I mean, you able to get out big threats early with Ceruledge is just so valuable. Of coming in, you kill the Iron Hands, you break the Mimikyu sub, and you get a free swap into Snorlax now. And the Metronome, apparently there was some kind of deal made for where you bring Snorlax with Metronome. So, Metronome yippee. But even there, you get tricked, and it doesn't look like it upsets your play at all. Like, you start losing momentum, and immediately you just pick it back up again. And it's so strong. Because Ceruledge comes in, and he's having to make plays. You're able to react to them. And in-game, Grin comes in and does Grin things with Battle Bond. It's just so strong.
Yeah, I think from the week 2 loss, I think Bump realized he just needs to slow down a little bit. And I think it's definitely been coming into his... or it's been working in his favor. He's been thinking about his plays a lot more. And it definitely has, like I said, been helping him. I think, specifically in the week 4 matchup, I think he had a really good read on Rex because he knew... Obviously, Rex knew he was Terra Ground. The Terra Blast into the Tentacle was obvious. So getting the read right and calling Bronzong in on clicking Dark Pulse, that was a really good play. And I think that's what's going to be able to have Bup swing his season around so far. Because as we stated in the beginning, this is still a really, really scary team. And I think Bup's just been figuring it out. And I don't think it's going to be an easy time for the rest of these 4 teams.
Oh yeah, it looks like they figured it out. Well, so good. Moving on to 8th is the Boston Bulbasaurs. So teams, trades were made. So we'll cover those real quick. Garganackle for King Gambit, so King Gambit's on this team now, and then Manaphy for Urshifu Rapid Strike. Not horrible trades. There's a lot of dual typings here. Of Steel with Goldengo and King Gambit. You have fighting between Blaziken and Urshifu. You have fire between Blaziken and Urshifu. You have fire between Blaziken and Entei. So I think that's gonna be a little rough if you really have 3, maybe 4 offensive typings to throw around. We'll see. But that being said, week 3 you have a 4-0 loss. But week 2 you pick up a win against Columbus Conkeldurrs, which was a super strong win. So I kind of want to go over that one first before we go into week 3. So, pull up. Okay, so first off, the bulk you bring to this team of Dozo with Gliscor is just so threatening. And your offensive pieces, because of that, are able to come in with some wiggle room, and they're able to just keep getting chip off. You use your Gliscor on a more offensive piece, you do huge damage to the Blastoise. You sack your Dondozo when you need to for a free swap, which is perfect, and you just keep bringing Mons in and doing 30 to 40 to even over half, which is so strong. Great play, honestly, was when that Grimmsnarl came out, and it lowered your attack, and then Salamence came in for the Intimidate, you seeing that coming and clicking SD again to then kill the Salamence behind screens was so like there's such a heads up play. Fantastic play that really got you a lot of momentum. You traded your Gliscor for a Salamence, which I would say any day of the week, that's a fantastic trade. And then the rest of the game just goes exactly how you need to. You make the right swaps, and keep doing chunks of damage. Ape got a little scary there for a second. I'm the Terrawater Ape, but because the way you played the game, you had plenty of pieces left over for it. The Chople on King Gambit was exactly what you needed for building. And then King Gambit came and did King Gambit things. I mean, King Gambit is such a threat. Crazy Pokemon. Now going to week 3. This is your loss. And on matchup, you just lose to Thundurus Therian. So, especially because it's Terra. So I think the building in this match should be what week 4 was. I'm glad you hit that stride of getting that building where you need it to be. But like certain things like Take Heart on Manaphy or just not bringing either of your ground types to a Thundurus match, bringing Terra Fighting on Goldengo, which is your special attacker, and just this bulk up Corviknight comes out and you're just throwing all of your physical mons at it. Like, you know, based on later in the game, that it's going to do 78%. But regardless, you keep throwing in all of these physical threats, and it loses you the game. But with that being said, I think there's still room for you to make playoffs. I want to end as many as I can, as long as I remember. I want to end all these off with saying playoffs for this team is definitely possible. You're 2-2 right now. You have a negative diff, but that's fine. This team is strong enough with some of its offensive pieces, and King Gambit, obviously, to where it can just kind of come in and clean up games. And I think if you keep pushing that building like we saw in week 4 into your future games, you're going to be able to inch into playoffs. But you have to build like you did in week 4. Week 4 was exactly what this team needs to see. If you keep making plays like you were in week 3 and week 2 even, then you're going to struggle a lot to gain ground in those matches.
Yeah. The one thing I did notice for this team, and it's as a flaw, I should say, is alongside the dual typings, I feel like a lot of your offensive pieces can be exploited, especially because you really only have one special mon. So you can kind of dedicate, one mon, set aside, this is the Goldengo answer. It can handle Goldengo. And then all of your more physical pieces, they definitely can be exploited. Urshifu, any bulky water, you just slap a rocket. Or any water resist, I should say. Just slap a Rocky Helmet on it, or Shifu just takes so much from the Rocky Helmet chip. Gambit, you need that. You need some turns to set it up, either with Swords Dance or after enough people die. Orgerpon can't run boots. It's taking 25 every time it wants to switch in if you just bring rocks. So, but I do think this team has definitely gotten a lot more offensively, better. I think the offense can be exploited, and I think any good players going into these matches can and will exploit them.
Moving on to number 7th, East Coast Krooks. A little bit of a fall from grace, really strong week 1 and 2, and then coming off a double loss on week 3 and 4. Granted, they're close. There is a couple trades I want to mention. Thundurus for Zapdos is huge, especially since you're a rain team. Getting Zapdos on here is great for your roster. Brambleghast to Trevenant, I'm not a big fan of. Trevenant is really like a Trick Room mon, and I guess it has a little bit of value because it's a bulkier grass than Brambleghast is. But especially when you pick up Zapdos who can do Tailwind stuff for Brambleghast as kind of a under threat, like a not acknowledged threat to bring in and do damage in the mid game. I think Trevenant doesn't bring enough other than it's a slightly bulkier grass type to this team. It's not going to do anything that Brambleghast wasn't. And it's losing some of the options Brambleghast had for this team. But Zapdos on a Brain team is just tried and true. It's just going to do work. Going into week 3 is against King Keldeos. You lost 3-0. You really, just in this match, there was a lot of plays that were made that... It's the same thing I've been talking about, of sitting here and being like, I know what my team does, so I know how they're going to react to it. especially with like the electro shot into the Jolteon was really rough and lost you a lot of momentum. Because then your Ursaluna, it was set up, but now it has to swap out because of the percentage you're at. If you were to click like Terra Blast into that Jolteon, because I believe at the time you were already +1 just to do damage to it, and it would have killed, and you still have that momentum going into other Mons. And at the very least, you pick up a 2-for-1 trade with Ursaluna if like Gouging Fire wanted to come in afterwards. But you get to the end game, and because you've let certain Mons get chipped without getting enough value out, Zoroark comes in, and it just cleans up the game completely. Which is rough. Which is rough to see. It also is a learning moment of, I think a lot of people are learning this from matches I've seen, of when your Weather Setter comes in, if it dies to hazards as it's coming in, it doesn't set up its weather. It goes hazard damage, then you're in, and you can do whatever your in thing is, if it's weather or whatever. I think that also being a misplay there, but that's like, live and learn. Now you know that going into other matches, especially for Pelipper, because it's weak to rocks. You got to keep that in mind going forward, because I think if you had the rain there, then the game would have gone a lot differently, because Bearskita would have outsped. I still don't think you had enough pieces to deal with that Gouging Fire, but at least it would have been closer. Moving into Week 4, you went up against Richmond Ragingbolts and was so close in this match. This one was such a close match. But just letting certain pieces set up on you was, like that Moltres just getting free setup turns to do what it wants. Cleaning Nasty Plot and Agility and then popping the Weakness Policy was really, really rough, because then you lose your Terra Ursaluna, and that's a huge piece of your team that's just gone in the first 2 turns of the match. And then from there, just not having the Wicked Blow answers is rough. Because like if you see a Wicked Blow, like a Wicked Blow on the opposite side of the team, you need a dedicated answer to that. Always. And if Ursaluna was your answer with that with Terra, why do you risk it going up against this setup Moltres? And it's that issue of having this one really important Mon take care of these 2 really scary threats, because at some point, it's not going to be able to handle one because it was trying to handle the other. And it ended up losing you the game just because those momentum pieces, you weren't able to pick it back up again with between Excadrill, Pelipper, and Darkrai. I still think, obviously, this is a super scary team. I think Rain, the way you've built it, I think it's strong. You have the pieces you need to win these matches. If you come back from this for the next few weeks, you're definitely going to be able to make playoffs. We've seen what this team can do. But yeah, you just need... I feel you're leaning too hard on Ursaluna. Start leaning on, like, Terra Okidogi, or start bringing in, like, screens for Klefki to set up that Ursaluna, maybe. And I think you're going to start seeing a lot more success.
Yeah. Another point I wanted to bring on the Brambleghast trade, I don't think it's the best for you. But also, I think it's because now you only have one form of removal. And on a Rain team, you kind of want Pelipper to be able to switch in as easy as it can. And while Excadrill doesn't necessarily hate always running Spin, if you realize, hey, this guy's pretty ground weak. You know, Scarf Exca or Banded Exca goes really hard here. But it's my one form of removal, and rocks really mess up the Pelipper. I think you're just going to be put into this really rough spot of, well, now I have to choose between having Exca be this really scary offensive piece, but now Pelipper's taking 25 every time it switches in, or maybe nerf Exca a little bit to let Pelipper switch in more. And I really think that's going to hamper your team a little bit, but I think overall, I think it's fine. Again, the Zapdos change, huge. Zapdos is great. I'm shocked we haven't seen a lot more Bearskita in action. I felt like Bearskita has been kind of doing nothing these games, and I think this mod is really terrifying, especially in rain. No Terra sucks, but it's whatever. But yeah, I think overall this team is it's the same spot it has been in, but some changes are worse, some changes are better for it.
Yep. Moving on to number 6, we have King Keldeos. No new trades to go over, still the same team, still the monstrous Orgerpon Teal coming in with the other offensive pieces of Gouging Fire and all that. Moving on, your Week 3 match was against East Coast, which we just went over, of you getting enough chip on like offensive pieces to where in the end game he doesn't have enough to deal with your threats. Because the Zoroark coming in doing huge amounts of damage, and then you still have a Gouging Fire at full health, which is awesome. Making the right plays when you need to, like with Jolteon, and not getting punished for it gets you huge momentum. And taking risks like that is what's allowing you to get these steps up on your opponent. Certain plays I think could have been better build-wise. I think in front of because the Archrilodon is Terra Fairy, setting up rocks in its face I think isn't the best play. And if you would have changed that turn differently to get more damage on the Archrilodon with like a Headlong Rush or an Earthquake to get damage off on it, would have made you, I guess it's at 2 defense. But then at that point, why are you switching in your Great Tusk? Right? And if you make plays like that, where you don't have to sack a Great Tusk, then you're not going to need to make those risks going forward like you did with Jolteon. Because, like I said with Krooks, if he didn't click Electro Shot, and he just clicked Terra Blast, then Jolteon dies, and you still have to deal with this Archrilodon, right? And then moving in to week 4, super close match against Icirrus. Orgerpon kind of shows of its weakness a little bit here. I assume it was also just banded as per the usual, but as you get towards the end game, because that Moltres exists, you not having a move to hit that Moltres in the end game is directly what caused you to lose the game. And I know there was a head smash miss into that Serena, and that could have gotten you ground. But at the end of the day, if you had the right moves, the miss wouldn't have mattered, right? Which is just another issue of building the exact right things you need to build with when you bring them to matches. Otherwise, again, the games are great. Umbreon gets used really well. Orgerpon Teal is a threat. I think the way you play Hisui in Arcanine, or not Hisui in Arcanine, Hisui in the Zoroark is really strong. It always, in every game I've seen you bring it, it's inching out a lot of damage against strong Mons. That's helping you in the late game kill those Mons. But there's just a couple areas where it's like that Moltres, or like that against the Great Tusk, of these little things of, I have to keep in mind how they're going to react to me and make a play counter to that. Going in, I think you're going to make playoffs. I think just based on the team, based on play, I think you're going to make it. It's more so just a cautionary tale. Just be careful. Don't make sure you're building and you're actually registering what's a threat to your Mons. If they're offensive or defensive, doesn't matter. Make sure you know what's countering them and building appropriately. And I think you got this on lock for playoffs.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add. I still think this is an incredibly scary team, and yeah,
Absolutely.
Playoff material.
Moving on, we have next is Chicago. So, all right, so week 3, you lose 5-0 to Icirrus City, but that's a really strong team. 5-0 is rough though, coming off of 2 wins. But then you pick up momentum again immediately with another win against the Scottish Stoutlands. No trades to go over at all, so still that same strong team. Terra Rillaboom, honestly is putting in a lot more work than I thought it would. I thought it was like a fun little thing, but it's been putting on a lot more work than I think it has any right to. Just being a piece to set up with. But you've been using it fantastic. I mean, in your week 3 match, Rillaboom against a Moltres team was still getting value off, because you were able to have moves to get rid of like heavy duty boots, which is going to help so much in the late game if you're able to put up rocks with like your Tinkaton or your Landorus. This match really comes down to just you just got out teched. The Imprisoned Jirachi was just such a strong tech against you because your answer was very obvious for it. Which is rough, but it's one of those things that don't beat yourself up too hard for. It's not like you made any direct misplays. You just got outplayed. Which is always, I think, a little better than, say, oh man, I could have done this differently. Which I think there were things in that match you could have done to kind of get around that. But I don't blame you. The shock of Imprison on Jirachi for your Encore Mon would throw anyone off their game. But you don't let that lose you momentum. You immediately go into your next game and another strong showing. And it's against a scary team too, because on matchup, this Thunderous, because it's Terra Dragon, really is strong into your team. Because, I mean, Terra Thunder is strong in any team, but I don't think you let it gain almost any ground here. I mean, your Azumarill went crazy here. It did so much damage and chipped so many things. Like, it did the 62% with Aqua Jet to that Thunderous Therian, which just allows you to clean it up. I think bringing Scarf on Latios is super strong. Flip Turn is just so good for it in this matchup of being able to get out when it forces a swap. And again, Rillaboom comes in and it just gets value. All your Mons, that's I think the end of the day, is all your Mons come in, and every time one of your Pokemon are coming in, they're getting value. Every single time. You never find yourself on a back foot of where I swapped a Mon in and now I immediately have to like recalculate what I'm doing and not going to be able to get value off of this swap. Every single swap is getting value, which I think is just a really strong showing to you as a builder and as a player. Moving on to like playoffs, I think you're on lock for playoffs. Keep doing what you've been doing. Like, don't let that 5 loss trip you up too much going forward, because you're so strong. Your team is so strong. You're showing you're such a strong player. Like, you could go so far. So don't let that trip you up. Keep doing what you've been doing. Yeah.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I think, as we've said from the beginning, these top 5 Mons are just incredibly terrifying, and we've seen work from the Azumarill in that last match. I think the only thing holding this team back is, again, that a little bit of predictability in those 5 Mons, but it's one of those things where, like, yeah, you know these Mons are coming. You probably almost guess they're set some of the times, but that doesn't mean you could stop it, you know? Not everyone has these pieces, and I think Chicago has been just using the fact you can just throw things out as a threat and just get damage, get kills. I think he's been playing that part really well, and yeah, like Max said, this is for sure a playoffs team.
Moving on to number 4, we have Scottish Stoutlands. So Scottish Stoutlands, week 3 you picked up a win against Boston Bulbasaurs, and week 4 lost 2-0 to Chicago Chimchars. No trades, still the same team since the beginning of the week. So, again, same things we've been saying. Super scary team. The Thunderous Therian is super scary. Meloetta is another super scary Terra. Hisuian Samurott is great for spikes for this team. Corviknight has been showing up. I think every week Corviknight has shown up and gotten a lot of value off, which just shows it's such a strong Pokemon. Going into week 3 of Corviknight, speaking of, it just sets up and wins, which kind of goes to show you of most people expect Corviknight to be a certain way. So whenever you're able to have your team has enough flexibility to where you can play a Bulkymon offensively is always going to get you a lot of value. And here that was exactly the case. It was able to set up and just sweep. This next week against Keldeos, as much as the game, like, they kept getting value, you weren't on the back foot per se a lot. Other than that Azumarill did a lot of work. And I think that just comes into if there's a Belly Drum Mon or some kind of, like, I think Shell Smash is another one of those moves, you have to prep for it out of principle. Because if you don't prep enough for it and you let it get free value off to do the Shell Smash or Belly Drum, you're gonna lose ground. Like, I think, for example, Dragalge, if you're gonna do Endure Custab. And then you're going to Endure, you'll live 1 hit of anything, you'll go first no matter what they decide to click, and you can Sludge Wave, and then boom. That's your one thing, you just have this item specifically on this Pokemon, and now, look at that. Now this Azumarill is just a null factor, you don't have to worry about it. Certain build things like that, I think is going to get you these wins as you're going up against these higher tier teams, and people are trying to lock in for playoffs, because the wins are going to start getting harder, and this goes across the board for most teams. The wins are going to start getting harder. The farther into the season we get and the closer to playoffs we get, the people who now realize, oh shit, I can lock into playoffs, they're going to start playing harder. They're going to start prepping harder. They're going to start like saying, okay, this is really good, this is really good, this is what they're going to do, I'm going to out-prep them. So you need, these little things might not have cost you anything early on, but now as we're getting later, you have to have something. Like, you have to have that 1 inch over of this Mon is a threat. Here is the Mon to deal with it, dedicated to dealing with it, but also has a little bit other value if it doesn't need to, right? Otherwise, I think you're still a strong team. Your weeks 1 through 3 going undefeated, I think, shows that this team is a threat. It's just those little bit of understanding what the threats to your team are, right? Otherwise, I think you're going to be playoffs. I think this is a playoffs team for sure. It's just, as you get there, how hard are you going to have to work for it?
I agree, as always. I think Lyrics has, as I say before in these previous PRs, I think Lyrics has just drafted a team he's super comfortable with. I think that's been really showing out, as he's not afraid to show off these more like weird sets as like the bulk up Corver Knight. I think one of these games he brought mixed Hamrot sets that people wouldn't see coming, but he knows these bonds so inside and out that he feels comfortable in bringing them, and I think that's really proving to his advantage.
Moving on to number 3 is Columbus Conkeldurrs. This team, again, it's so strong. It's just so strong. No trades have been made. I don't think any trades need to be made to this team. I think this team is exactly how it needs to be. Ape is the kill leader. Terra Ape, so scary. It's 10 kills right now, inching out over Hoopa. Love to see it. Going into your week 3 match, you win 1-0. A super close win. And then week 4, you lose 2-0 to Boston, which is rough. Week 1 is just that you're dealing with the 2 threats you need to of Iron Bundle and Chiyu. You're making the sacks you need to. I like that you're not afraid in this match. Some people would be afraid of like, oh, but Scizor could be useful later because of priority. No, I need to sack it here now because other things have more value. Just a sign of understanding your team. Stuff like that is what's getting you this value of making your sacks at the right time in this game. It's a close win, but it's a handled win, if that makes sense. It might be close, but it wasn't like scary for a second, you know? Like, you had it handled the entire time, regardless of how close the outcome seemed. I think screens were super strong in this match. Again, I think Grimmsnarl is always strong, but especially here, that light screen for the Chiyu and the Iron Bundle is so strong. I don't know what else to say. This team is just so it has all the pieces it needs to. Kowtow, just as a player, is making the exact plays he needs to. He's making good sacks. He's making sure his monster's supported well. Moving on, though, to a negative for week 4. This one really comes down to, you see a King Gambit on the team. When King Gambit is on, he's one of those mons. He's kind of like Palafin, of where he needs so much prep. You have to know King Gambit is here. In the late game, he's going to come out. I need in the late game to have an answer for him, or I could just straight up lose, which is exactly what happened. And I think it's play on their part of whittling down answers for it, but I also think you could have made more predictive plays, if that makes sense. For example, knocking off the Dondozo into the Torn. I think clicking something else there, like clicking a U-turn there, if it stays in or if it swaps, you have answers to it. Don't let Dondozo get free value, because you knock off its leftovers, great, but... And then, like, setting up hazards on it when it's, like, Curse Unaware. That's what Dondozo does. I think setting up, like, a Toxic on that first turn would have been way better, and then swapping it to something that can take advantage of that, and not letting it get any extra turns of value out is super important. Again, Masquerade bails you out here, though, because of the crits, so it didn't end up super horrible. But it's just taking... Every time you take these extra turns to do what could have been done in less turns, you're losing value, and you're losing percentage on your Pokemon, which then leads to situations in the end game where you're getting cleaned up by a certain Pokemon, you know? So I think if you just made tighten up those plays a little bit more and played a little bit more offensive with this team, you're going to prevent situations like that. Prevent situations like a late game setup cleaner coming in and just doing what it needs to do, you know? Otherwise, I think this team locks playoffs. I still have this team wins it all. I think it's super strong. I think Kowtow is a great player and understands his team really well. But yeah.
I don't think Kowtow played their week 4 match even that wrong. I normally hate saying this, but I do think a little bit of hacks with the metronome into the power whip on the Terra Water might have actually like helped seal the deal for Boston. But yeah, I think Kowtow has been playing super well. He's a really great player, in my opinion, and I feel like we've beat this point to death, but this team's terrifying. Like, I think it's amazing the fact that Terra Stoutlands has only gotten 2 kills, and I think that just shows how terrifying Terra Ape is. Because on like any other team in any other division, Terra Stoutlands is like the guy, and to have Mence just be a secondary piece is crazy.
Oh, yeah.
And I think this shows how confident Kowtow is in this ape and how well it's been doing.
I agree. Moving on to number 2, we have Timekeepers. Week 3, super close, lost it by 1-0. Week 4 with a 4-0. But there was a lot of team trades. And for most teams, it's like a little bit, but I think a bulk of what I'm about to say is going to be about these team trades. You drop a Lomamola, Landorus, Infernape, Clefable, and then Reverum and Bellybolt for Dragonite, Terra Hatterene, Toxapex, Sandy Shocks, and Diospeed. Overall, I think these trades are just a negative for you. I think if you want to get rid of a Lomamola for Toxapex, for different kinds of value, I think that's fine. I mean, a Lomamola was in the matches, was doing just enough. It was a bulky piece. Toxapex can probably get more value out with poisoning things and getting more... Because, I mean, that's what Lomamola wants to do if it had Toxic. But now Toxapex does that, just no wishing. So that's fine. Dropping Landorus as a Terra... I mean, Hoop Unbound was your go-to Terra anyway, so if you're more comfortable doing something else, that's fine. But dropping both Infernape and Clef. I think Infernape had a lot of value of coming in and doing damage, being able to U-turn. AV sets, because it just wants to run 4 attacks anyway. Another rocker for your team if you need it, if you want to do setup things. Clefable getting dropped, I think, is a tragedy for this team. Clefable is such a strong Pokemon every single time, and especially with the bulk you have of having an unaware Mon just ready to go anytime if things start setting up on your bulk, I think is super valuable. I think having Magic Guard Calm Mind sets is super valuable. I think being able to just throw out Wishes or Toxics or whatever you need to do is super valuable for this team. And I don't think the pieces you picked up are giving you enough value to overcome that. I think Dragonite is a fine Pokemon. I don't think it does anything for you special on this team. Like, it's just a Mon. I mean, I guess you have a Dragon type now, but like you didn't really need one. Now you have another Rock weakness, and your removal is still Cryogonal. Hatterene as a Terra Captain, I don't think Hatterene is a very good Pokemon with Terra. I mean, like, I guess it can do Healing Wish things, technically, and Magic Bounce for hazards, but like, if that's what you're swapping your Clefable for, it's just losing so much value of what that slot could be, and especially now it's taking up your Terra position of where you could Terra on other things. Like, you could do Terra Superior, and that'd be really scary, because now you're giving it coverage moves it needs. You can do Terra Sandy Shocks and do Electric and Ice and all that, and get value off that way with Booster and getting Booster speeds off, and that being just really strong. But putting Terra on Hatterene, it signals to me that you were already doing Trick Room with Hoopa Unbound, and you thought, if I pick up Hatterene, then both of my Terra threats are Trick Room, and I have more Trick Room synergy. But they're doing the same thing. When are you ever going to look at Trick Room against opponent and be like, you know what? Instead of my Terra Hoopa Unbound in Trick Room, I'm going to bring Terra Hatterene instead. I don't see the vision. And Diospeed is fine. Diospeed is Diospeed. I mean, it's gonna do what you need it to do. It's a super big setup threat. It does hazards. It does sash shit. It's really good. But just losing so much value in those trades, I think, is an overall negative for your team. But moving on to your Week 3 and Week 4. Again, Week 3, super close. The para on that Torn really sealed the deal. But up until that point, it was neck and neck. It was tooth and nail, each of you getting value back and forth. Playing super well. I like the Baton Pass bring over Flip Turn for Rocky Helmet or on like Amoonguss or whatever was going to have it. I think Bellybolt here, I don't understand why it was brought here. Like, I guess screens, but taking up a whole slot for that belly bolt. This is a little thing I brought up when we were reviewing these games to begin with. If it was soak for that Garchomp, I think that would have been awesome. It was like soak with Shucka to then parabolic discharge a soaked Garchomp to get damage off for Torn later, and then screens. I think that would have been incredible. Because you can do that. You can also do that on a Moongus, and you're getting value back. But just coming in to set up screens, and that's really it, and then just being Garchomp fodder, I think that also lost you a lot of ground. Otherwise, the team, like, just did what the team wants to do. It's super fat. It keeps getting chunks of value off of until the very end of the game, where you find out, is that enough? And here, it just wasn't. Going into your Week 4 match, super strong win. Again, it's your bulk. Your bulk and your Torn. Because of your bulk, that Torn is able to do so much offensive things that it's just so scary. Because it's this threat that's coming in, it's doing a lot of damage, and you're getting chip in return off of it, but because of the region, it just doesn't matter. It's going to come in again at 80% and live anything and throw off a super strong move. But yeah, Terra Lando also showed up for the first time over Hoopa, which is really cool to see. I think the agility on Empoleon, the agility competitive, was so cool with weakness policy popping. I think it was so cool to see. If that Chi-Yu wasn't Terra Water, or I think he would have just won at that point. But man, Endeavor Quick Attack with Infernape is great here. It worked perfect for you to deal. You traded an Infernape for a Iron Bundle, which is such a valuable trade. And you still got the Endeavor off on Mandibuzz to bring it down to 1%, and that's one of their biggest walls. Lando Terra Electric was interesting. Like I said, Lando coming in is interesting. Based on the way it was played this game, I understand why you wanted to trade it away. I get it. I still think it was really strong, though, to have as a backup. But I guess I get it for comfort reasons. But otherwise, yeah. Strong number 2, I think... I'm interested to see... I still think you're going to make playoffs, right? But these team changes might come to bite you a little bit, just because the value of your team is now completely different. So...
Yeah, I wouldn't say on the trade aspect. I do see the vision with it. I do see the Trick Room aspect of Hatterene. I think it might have also been more so for that magic bounce, because I think Monkey saw, hey, I kind of get beat by Hazard, so having a Mon to at least have them scared to click spikes in case it, or stealth rock in case it switches in, is a good shout. But I do think, like Max said, overall, I think Clef is just the better Mon pound for pound. And if you want to get rid of Lando and get another Terra Cap, I think Terra Clef is pretty good. You know, for more defensive sets, being able to unaware any Mon, great. And then having the extra damage of stab, or even coverage, I know Clefable gets a lot though, of, you know, for those offensive Magic Guard sets is really good. And I do think, I don't know if I'd get both Sandy and Dio, but I think having Dio speed for that spike support was something that really this team was missing, and being able to punish them trying to switch out into the right thing with those spikes and just constantly getting that hazard damage up is good. But like Max said, I think overall this team has gotten weaker, but I think Monkey has been playing so well, and this team still has the core pieces where it might not matter, or we could just be wrong. Maybe this team gets a lot better going into the future. But yeah.
Moving on to top 1, taking their rightful place back at the throne from going our first PR to our second to now our third. Only undefeated team in Neon right now, Icirrus City. And it's not a surprise why they're up here. Their team is super strong, and they've done nothing but win each game. There's no wiggle room anymore. This team is a threat. Every single regardless of how your team matches up against it, it is a threat. Week 3, Jirachi just goes to show of the strength of the player running the team. Of having that heads-up play to predict, that's how they're going to deal with like a setup threat, and then doing Imprison Encore on Jirachi. And just saying that they're not going to bring their dark type into this matchup, which they have, is such, I want to say like it's such a ballsy play, but it's a risk that works out for you. And I think is what's making these games so just overwhelming, is you're making the right risks at the right time to get value off of them. Like I said, that week 3 match, there's not much to say there. It's just a great play. Week 4, super close. I think this game was losable. Absolutely. I think this is probably the closest game you've had. This is absolutely the closest game you've had. There were a couple things just in here that I think could have been better, but I don't think any plays that in the match that were made were wrong. I think you brought what you needed to. I think you brought the right moves. I just think that Arcanine was just so scary. That's what I think. I think the Tinglu value at the very beginning of losing that value to deal with that Arcanine later was super scary. But I can also see that Tinglu was, because it was Rindo Berry, was attempting to be your Orgerpon check. But I think it was better suited at that Arcanine. Because that Arcanine was really scary for a while. But you pulled it out. You had the pieces you need at the end game to deal with what threats were left. The miss is unfortunate for them. But like I said, I think because of that Moltres and how that Orgerpon didn't have the coverage it needed, you still would have inched out that win. But, man, if that Orgerpon had the move it needed to, this would have been your first loss. So going forward, I think this team obviously locks playoffs. I think there's no question about that. I think they get all the way to finals, honestly. And the only question on my mind is how close is it going to be with the other top teams? Of how much ground are you going to be able to continue to gain? Are you going to be able to continue to go undefeated? Like, questions like that. Because all eyes are on you right now. You're the top 1 team. You're the only undefeated team. Every showing has been really strong. So now how are the other teams going to react to you when they prep against you? I think you still have a strong schedule going forward. So I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, I mean, I think from the start of the season, we saw, hey, Aiden is going to do great, and he has been doing great. And I think after that, the week 2 PRs, it really lit a fire under his ass, as I've been saying a lot. And I think now, more so than ever, he has a point to prove, which you can thank us for that. But yeah, no.
You're welcome.
No, Aiden, I think Aiden's probably, like, no disrespect to anyone else in Neon, but I think Aiden is just the best player, and having a team like this, as we said from the beginning, I am almost shocked if Aiden doesn't take it home this time. I think he's been playing super well. I think, obviously, Jirachi set week 5 was great. And, yeah, like, I have nothing more to add because Aiden's just been proving why this guy is number 1.
Before we sign off, I did want to mention, I'd mention this at the end of every time, we're now at the point for playoffs. So we're starting to look ahead for playoffs. We're halfway through the season. A lot of these upper teams are pretty much, as long as they don't fumble, are going to be able to lock into playoffs. It's really a race for those bottom 2 slots. I think most anyone on the bottom half can turn it around, but it's going to be hard. So this is the moment where if you want to make playoffs, if that's your goal for this season, and you're not in those like top 5 positions, you need to make sure you're locking in for these matches, especially depending on if you're going up against other people that are like around your position or slightly under you. You need to make sure that even if you're going to lose, that's a 1-0 loss at most. That's a 1-0 loss. You know what I mean? I'm excited to see it though. This is always the point in the seasons I love to watch of where there seems to be like a push. You can see teams that are like really pushing for playoffs. You'll see teams starting to go like, all right, I need to get this win for playoffs. So I'm super excited to leave this here and then come back in 2 more weeks right before like the last 2 weeks of the season and see where teams lie. Because at that point, we're really going to be able to see, all right, these are the playoff teams. These are the teams that have just lost contention. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
I'll step in here for a second. If I may, Neon has been really competitive. I've been seeing a lot of great sets and a lot of great plays. And even though like some of these teams like Richmond, Ottawa are down here, I still think they can win some games. There's no doubt in my mind. Ottawa's done it before. He's turned it around. 0-4, I'm pretty sure, way back when. And it seems like Icirrus City, you know? Will he be as the commissioner? You know a lot of stories, you know a lot of sets, and you know a lot of these backstories and history between players. Icirrus City, will he be like a Frederick Lefkes? Will he be a regular season champ and then go 0-1 in playoffs? Will he lose in quarters? I don't know. But these are things to watch out for. like Timekeepers, changed up his whole team. Is he more comfortable? Like, he's the first time in PBO.
Yeah.
And he's played in other leagues. Are these his comfort mons? Is this like blowing up to see what maybe I can try something new, maybe to counter Icirrus City team come playoff time? Just like Max said. I lost my train of thought. Anyway, will these teams bring real sets?
Yeah.
For other
How many more
playoff
metronomes
teams?
Are we gonna see?
Speaking of metronome, all you players listening to this and make it this far in the video, I don't mind it. You know, the PBO at the end of the day, it's for fun. But if y'all keep bringing metronome and we keep seeing last respects getting hit maybe by this luck, I'm gonna have to limit the metronome set. That's all I'm saying. The mods and I have to have a talk about these metronome sets. I don't mind them. Yeah, and the other teams like Scottish Stoutlands, Columbus Conkeldurrs, Chicago, they're the 3-1s. It's just super competitive. East Crook start off 2-0. 2-2 now. B, always a sleeper team, and somehow Melbourne popping up at number 8. Boston 2-2, always surprising, and Caborca blowing up his team. I think he'll look way more comfortable with his new team. And then for Rex,
for sure.
Rex, I have the pleasure to be in VC with some of these Neon players more often than others, and he likes to meme a bit, but he likes to bring some creative sets, and it's nice to see what he can do with them. So, Neon players, just keep winning. I wish all of y'all could win, but unfortunately that is not the case.
Not everyone can have the trophy.
No.
You gotta climb up all the way to the top.
And with that being said, June, the last words, Mac?
No, I'm good.
Yeah, Rex, bring the Fampy, then you'll start winning.
Oh,
Actually,
yeah.
I do have one.
Oh?
Week 7's gonna be crazy because it's Icirrus versus Columbus Conkeldurrs, and that is what I envision the finals to be. So, like, I'm excited.
Yeah. We have to go back and watch the preseason one where we hit on who was gonna make it. But with that being said, thank y'all for watching. Thank you, June and Max, so much for leading this. And we will see you in 2 weeks' time. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.